After the Ukrainian armed forces strike, the headquarters of Russia's Black Sea Fleet in Sevastopol burned down. And in general, it's heating up all over Russia, from Voronezh to Tuapse. Here's how it happened.
I wish you a very good morning, so to speak.
It was incredibly loud and very intense.
And also, Defense Minister Fedorov announced the launch of the Logistics Knockdown program. Now, strikes on Russia's rear will become even harsher, and middle strike attacks will be even larger in scale. Meanwhile, super champion Alexander Usyk, after a grueling victory over Rico Verhoeven, responded to all his critics. And the Russian Federation's representative to the UN, a so-called Not Benzia, stated that he is against the war. We'll discuss that too. Hello friends, this is the Pritseli Project. I'm Volodymyr Timoshenko. Let's go. So naturally, we'll start with the most important news. After a powerful attack by the Ukrainian armed forces, the headquarters of Russia's Black Sea Fleet in Sevastopol burned to the ground. This is being reported directly in the chats. Yes, Storm Shadow missiles were used last night. They struck and gave a very clear greeting to the headquarters of the Russian Black Sea Fleet in that very temporarily occupied Sevastopol. Moreover, the new headquarters has already been destroyed. Our missiles demolished the old one back in 2023. According to analysts, a fire broke out inside the building after the strike. And of course, friends, things were very lively and heated all across Russia. There were arrivals in Tuapse again. And I want to tell you that at this very moment, an oil depot is burning there. The traditional Russians are simply in shock. They say they have lost their appetite. Bon appétit. Well, you know, it is just like what Putin, your Russian leader of the time, used to say, like it or not. Be patient, my beauty. Everyone understands that this is just the beginning. I just want to remind you, this is already the 5th attack on the oil refinery in Tuapse this spring. By the way, the fuel oil swimming season has also opened in Tuapse. Don't believe it? Then we'll show you.
I see, the sea is in my mouth. What do you mean? How is this the sea? Are you serious? How
Do you like the sea? Awesome. White sand, you say?
Look at your feet. Look at your feet. How
Going to wash up now.
Figuring out how to do this.
Come on, go to the pool.
Yes, seriously, go to the pool, although in Tuapse, I think you can easily find fuel oil in the pool too. Well, yeah, as they say. All right, let's move on to other topics, or rather, let's continue the topic of strikes on Russia. This time, it's Voronezh. Thick smoke is rising near the Baltimore military airfield in Voronezh after the attack. Early yesterday morning, 2 high-speed targets were detected and destroyed by air defense forces on duty in the Nemero district of Voronezh. According to preliminary information, there are no casualties. The falling debris damaged a tire repair shop and a utility cabin. At least that's the information provided by the local governor. According to open sources, and this is important, friends, the 47th Guards Bomber Aviation Regiment of the Russian Federation is stationed at the Baltimore airfield. And this airfield has been regularly used by the Russian Air Force to carry out strikes on Ukrainian territory since the very beginning of the full-scale war on February 24, 2022. And right now, we have exclusive details about the latest explosions on Russian territory. Let's watch the report from my colleagues.
The night of May 27th, Russian regions and the temporarily occupied Crimea come under one of the largest series of drone and missile attacks in recent times. The Russian Ministry of Defense claims that during the night and morning, 140 Ukrainian fixed-wing unmanned aerial vehicles were intercepted and destroyed. They were shot down over several Russian regions, the annexed Crimea, as well as over the waters of the Azov and Black Seas. According to statements from the Russian-appointed authorities, Sevastopol was subjected to a combined strike. Mikhail Razvozhayev reports the use of various means of destruction, including, according to preliminary data, Storm Shadow cruise missiles. According to official information, air defense systems destroyed more than 20 drones over areas on the northern side, Fuelant, Sevastopol Bay, and Omega Bay. At the same time, Telegram channels are reporting a series of strikes on military infrastructure in Crimea. The areas of the Belbek, Saki, and Kacha airfields are mentioned, as well as military facilities at Cape Fuelant. Several powerful explosions have been reported in the area of Sevastopol Bay. Next, the central part of Russia. A missile alert was declared in the Voronezh region. According to the governor, 2 high-speed targets were destroyed. It is reported that debris damaged a tire repair shop building and a utility cabin. At the same time, according to a Telegram channel, smoke was observed in the area of the Baltimore military airfield. In the Rostov region, it is reported that a missile was intercepted over Taganrog. Debris fell onto a city street, causing cars to catch fire. Some assessments and analysis by Astra indicate the possible impact on aviation industry facilities in Taganrog, including the aircraft repair plant. In the Krasnodar region, in Tuapse, debris from drones was recorded falling on the territory of the seaport terminal. As a result, a fire broke out. According to the regional emergency headquarters, the fire was quickly extinguished by 80 personnel and 25 pieces of equipment, including units from the Ministry of Emergency Situations. Meanwhile, official reports are limited to statements about the elimination of the consequences.
An excellent report. I think you clearly understand the situation that terrorist Russia now quite deservedly finds itself in. And here is another fresh and very important piece of news. President Zelensky sent an urgent letter to Trump warning about Ukraine's critical shortage of missile defense systems. I'll quote, "When it comes to air defense against missiles, we rely on our friends. When it comes to protection against ballistic missiles, we almost exclusively rely on the United States." This was written by the president of Ukraine. So now here's another very interesting and noteworthy topic. Vasily Nebenzia, the person who represents the Russian Federation at the UN, quite unexpectedly, I would say, spoke out at the very same UN against the war, just for a brief moment. I'll quote, "I'm not saying that war is good, I don't like it," Nebenzia stated. But immediately after that, he began to justify the invasion of Ukraine by citing the threat from NATO. It is not about Nazism, the current ruling regime, or the so-called systematic persecution of Russian speakers. And then he added, "The fundamental difference between us is that we never intentionally attack innocent civilians. Hundreds dead, thousands of Ukrainians killed, Ukrainian children. That's right, unintentionally. You must be launching missiles and drones by accident, right?" So what was that with Nebenzia, and how are things really going for the Russians at the front? More on that next. Let's watch the report.
The Russian representative to the UN admitted that war is a bad thing. The Russian army is retreating on 2 fronts at once. The Ukrainian armed forces continue to deliver successful strikes on targets in the aggressor country. Watch more about this in the report. Vasily Nebenzia, Russia's permanent representative to the UN, admitted that war is not a good thing. He stated this during a briefing in the context of a question about a peace agreement. Nebenzia said that before reaching any agreements, it is supposedly necessary to resolve the issues that the aggressor country, Russia, considers to be the reasons for starting the war against Ukraine. According to him, among the possible reasons are Ukraine's potential NATO membership and the alleged threat that Ukraine poses to Russia. Speaking about the conduct of hostilities, he said,
"I'm not saying that war is a good thing. I don't like it.
"It is noteworthy that the words of Russia's permanent representative to the UN come against the backdrop of failures in the Russian army. The occupying forces have begun to retreat in 2 key sectors of the front at once, Zaporizhia and Dnipropetrovsk." This was stated by the head of the Council of Reservists of the Ukrainian Ground Forces, Ivan Timochka, in an interview with RBC Ukraine. According to him, the Russians have already failed their spring campaign and the expectations of the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin have not been met.
They said that Putin was already going all in, that Donetsk region had to be given up because the Russians would break through the defenses and be near Kyiv. And what do we have now? A failed spring campaign. In the Zaporizhia and Dnipropetrovsk regions, they are already retreating, not advancing.
Ivan Timoshko believes that the Kremlin's loud statements about new attacks on Kyiv are an attempt to escalate the situation as much as possible. In this way, Russia is trying to mask its failures at the front, as well as put pressure on Ukraine and its Western partners. Meanwhile, the armed forces of Ukraine continue to carry out successful strikes on Russian military targets. On the morning of May 27th, the headquarters of Russia's Black Sea Fleet was attacked in occupied Sevastopol. According to the Telegram channel Krymsky Veter, the headquarters was almost completely burned down. There were also explosions in Taganrog, Rostov region, Russia. According to the Telegram channel Astra, an aircraft repair plant was attacked, which resulted in a fire breaking out there. A fire was also recorded in the area of the Baltimore military airfield in Voronezh. After the attack, smoke rose in the area. In addition, Ukraine is systematically destroying the logistics of Russian troops in the south. Highways, fuel supplies, and the logistics of the occupying army are under attack. Thus, the armed forces of Ukraine are delivering more and more strikes against the logistics of Russian troops in the occupied territories of Zaporizhia and Kherson regions, as well as on the approaches to the temporarily occupied Crimea. In particular, the Russian land corridor, the Rostov-Jankoy highway, has come under fire control. The resort season in the temporarily occupied Crimea is also under threat, as is the supply of fuel, food, and goods to the peninsula.
So when will the war in Ukraine end? The very war that Putin started on Ukrainian soil. Former German Chancellor Angela Merkel has shared her, let's say, forecast. To quote Mrs. Merkel, in 10 years, the war in Ukraine hopefully will be over. According to the former German Chancellor, this is exactly what should make Ukraine an independent, free, and sovereign country. For my part, I would like to note that Ukraine already is such a country. And in general, if we follow Angela Merkel's logic, it turns out that without the war, Ukraine would not have been civilized. It seems to me that political retirement crept up on Mrs. Merkel unnoticed. But anyway, let's get back to the studio. Look, of course, making predictions about when the war in Ukraine will end is a very thankless task, but let's stick to the facts. So, the Russian army has begun to retreat on two fronts at once, on the Zaporizhia and Dnipropetrovsk directions. For the first time in a while, AFU Reservist Council head Ivan Timochka stated that the Ukrainian armed forces are creating hell for Russian logistics. You remember the statement, I mentioned it earlier, by Defense Minister Fedorov. And in general, there is information that the war in Ukraine could end in 6 months. But is that really the case? Let's figure it out in our next segment.
Zelensky has named the timeline for the end of the hot phase of the war. The aggressor country Russia is trying to compensate for its failures with strikes on the rear, a new anti-record for the occupying army at the front. More on this in the following segment. The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, revealed the possible timeline for the end of the hot phase of the war. According to Olga Vasilevska-Smagliuk, a member of parliament from the Servant of the People Party, the head of state spoke about this during a meeting with the faction. According to her, the president noted that there is a possibility of ending the hot phase by November, provided that security guarantees are given.
Right now, we have significant strategic advantages on the front that we can effectively capitalize on. The main goal is not to allow the Russian Federation the opportunity to deceive us and, after a brief temporary pause, recommence new hostilities or a new offensive.
In addition, Volodymyr Zelensky told the MPs that he is waiting to see who in Europe will now act as the moderator of the peace process. Ukraine is also expecting a delegation from the United States in the near future. At the same time, in his evening address, Zelensky stated that Ukraine has stabilized the front. According to him, the positions of the Ukrainian military have become stronger.
It is primarily thanks to the incredible courage of our people, as well as the use of drones, various advanced technologies, precise middle strikes, and our extensive long-range sanctions, that we have finally managed to effectively stabilize the front lines across the region.
Meanwhile, the situation for the aggressor country on the front is deteriorating. This was stated by Michael Kaufman, senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment, in an interview with New York Magazine. According to him, the way the Russian army is waging the war is yielding fewer and fewer results.
The Russian leadership was betting on constant pressure along the entire front line. Not on large-scale breakthroughs, but on intensive small operations along a wide front with the aim of exhausting Ukrainian forces and possibly causing the front to collapse. But that did not happen. And now this seems even less likely, given the adaptation of the Ukrainian military.
In the analyst's opinion, Russia is trying to compensate for its failures at the front with strikes on the rear, and because of this, it is ramping up the production of attack drones and increasing the use of ballistic missiles. At the same time, Kaufman notes that Ukraine is in a better position than before.
In fact, it is showing better results than many had originally expected. In the fall of 2024, the situation looked quite difficult. But then the front gradually began to stabilize. The Ukrainian political leadership has a comprehensive and nuanced understanding of the real state of affairs. And that is exactly the reason why there is no willingness to agree to disadvantageous and detrimental ceasefire terms.
The analyst concluded that time is increasingly not on Russia's side. The Russians were counting either on the collapse of the Ukrainian front or on the breakdown of Western support for Ukraine, but neither of these scenarios materialized. At the same time, the pace of Russian advances is rapidly decreasing. As the news agency officially reports, in May, Russia captured the smallest area on the front since March 2024. According to the Deep State Project, from May 1st to May 24th, Russia only succeeded in capturing 35 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory. At the same time, the defense forces continue to successfully regain full control over Ukrainian territories. Analysts believe that definitive conclusions about the scale of problems in the Russian army can be accurately drawn by the end of June. If by the time that point in time arrives the pace of the offensive does not increase significantly, it will be possible to conclude that the offensive capabilities of the Russian military have become noticeably diminished.
Friends, subscribe to Union for the truth about events in Ukraine, the civilized world, and how Putin's Russia is plunging into the abyss. As for that abyss, here it is. Let's call things by their proper names. The AFU. Right now, they are creating a real hell for Russian military logistics. Just see for yourself. Monitoring channels are literally flooded with fresh videos of burned out trucks and fuel tankers along the roads behind enemy lines. All of this is very telling. These shots really say a lot, as they used to say in the commercials. Instead of 1,000 words, just look at the work of our armed forces. And in general, let's do this. Right now, let's talk about how Ukrainian drones, and let's return to the studio, are burning the occupiers' military equipment. That's exactly what we'll discuss in our next segment, because there really is a lot to talk about, and you'll have plenty to see, I promise.
Ukrainian drones are massively destroying the occupiers' equipment, and the war is increasingly moving deeper into the territory of the aggressor country. For the first time, a carpet plan has been declared in Russian Kaliningrad. More on this in the following segment. Ukrainian drones continue to maintain fire control over the enemy's key transport arteries at a depth of more than 150 kilometers from the front line. On the morning of May 26th, the Telegram channel Excelenova Plus published a new video showing the destruction of Russian army military equipment. The exact location has not been disclosed. On the evening of May 25th, there was also a recorded strike on military logistics. The video likely shows a road in the occupied city of Donetsk region. Drones are increasingly successfully attacking Russian logistics in the temporarily occupied territories. Almost every day, new videos appear online showing the destruction of equipment. As is known, Ukrainian UAVs are keeping the Russians' land corridor to the temporarily occupied Crimea under fire control. Due to increasingly frequent attacks, Russia has even closed the route to the Crimean Peninsula for civilian vehicles. As reported by the publication Welt, the situation in the drone war is shifting in favor of Ukraine. The article specifically points out that previously, Ukrainian forces were primarily concentrated on the task of creating a death zone 15 to 30 kilometers wide along the front line. However, now Ukraine's drone forces are actively working to significantly expand it up to 150 kilometers beyond the line of contact. The publication cites a recent statement by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who reported an increase in such attacks.
One of our key priorities for the next few months is medium-range strikes. This year, we have already ordered 5 times more resources for such strikes than last year, and we will continue to expand the volume of orders and production.
Meanwhile, there are virtually no safe places left in Russia itself. In Russia's Kaliningrad, the cover plan was announced for the first time on the evening of May 25th. According to the Telegram channel Union, at Krabrovo airport, arrivals and departures of planes were halted and dozens of flights were circling in the sky, unable to land.
Yes, and here's a really telling joke. I just don't know what else to call it. It's the 5th year of the big war, and these are the kinds of victories the Z supporters have. Just listen to this, it's insane. On the Dobropoliye direction, our troops, this is according to Z channels, advanced into the center of Rodinskoye and captured, attention, a pig farm south of the city, as even enemy channels admit. Pressure on the southern flank against the Ukrainian armed forces is increasing. Fighting continues to the west of Grishino, as well as in the areas of Novo-Alexandrovka and Vasilyevka. Guys, seriously, being proud of capturing a pig farm is really the embodiment of the modern Russian world. Although, a pig farm Putin's war criminals, considering how Russian soldiers loot, rob, and even steal toilets from temporarily occupied territories like in the Kiev region, you surely remember those images, it's perfectly clear why Putin's fighters feel right at home on pig farms, nah? But anyway, now to something truly important. Is China really against these strikes on Ukraine, particularly on the city of Kiev? You remember the background? In short, the Russians wrote that they would strike. Their foreign ministry made such a statement. But what about China itself? The fact is, Mao Ning, a spokesperson for China's foreign ministry, commenting on Russia's threats to carry out systematic strikes on targets in Kiev, called on the relevant parties to refrain from escalating hostilities. And it seems that Russia really is backing down. Take a look at what Putin's talking mustache Peskov mumbled today.
Returning to the foreign ministry's warning about strikes on Kiev, it says that they will be systematic. Does this imply that they will be occurring on a daily basis, or perhaps repeated consistently at some fixed regular interval? Maybe you can provide some details?
Well, systematic doesn't mean periodic. Actually, being systematic is not the same as being periodic. In fact, the foreign ministry statement was already comprehensive.
What is he babbling about? He speaks in vague generalities and shifts the blame to statements from his own criminal foreign ministry. But what the Chinese said, now that really seems to have scared the bunker dwellers. Here are the details.
China has distanced itself from Moscow's threats to launch massive strikes on Kiev. While the Kremlin is sending threats of new attacks through the US, Beijing is calling for de-escalation, and Western diplomats are ignoring Russian blackmail. Why is Moscow ramping up the pressure right now, and what is really behind the Kremlin's new threats? This and more will be covered in the following report. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has commented on Moscow's threats to launch massive strikes on Kiev. Beijing has called on all parties to refrain from further escalation. The official representative of the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mao Ning, stated that China's position on the so-called Ukrainian crisis remains unchanged. According to her, the only way to resolve the conflict is through dialogue and negotiations.
We call upon the relevant parties to make joint efforts to quickly end the escalation and establish the necessary conditions for the resumption of dialogue and negotiations.
When asked for clarification on whether China would yield to Russian blackmail and whether it plans to evacuate its embassy diplomats from Kiev, the spokesperson for the foreign ministry neither confirmed nor denied it. Earlier, analysts from the Institute for the Study of War stated that Russia threatened systematic strikes on Kiev to demonstrate its strength after the humiliation associated with the three-day ceasefire from May 9th to 11th. Moscow is also trying to present pre-planned missile and drone strikes as a response to Ukraine. On May 25th, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, Sergei Lavrov, during a phone conversation with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, stated that the Russian army is allegedly beginning systematic strikes on facilities in Kiev supposedly used for the needs of the Ukrainian armed forces. Lavrov also drew the American side's attention to a preliminary statement by the Russian Foreign Ministry in which foreign states were advised to evacuate diplomatic personnel and citizens from Kiev. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio confirmed that Lavrov asked him to convey a message from Russian leader Vladimir Putin to U.S. President Donald Trump, stating that Russia would strike Kiev. Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Center for Countering Disinformation at the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, emphasized that China is distancing itself from Russia's threats to strike Kyiv and from Moscow's aggressive rhetoric, which began right after Putin's visit to Beijing.
Interestingly, it seems that Russia very much wants the United States to ask Putin to refrain from strikes that have no military purpose and serve only as regular acts of civilian terror.
Alexander Kovalenko noted that Sergei Lavrov's public statements about trying to send signals through Marco Rubio look like Moscow's attempt to convey a certain message to Donald Trump. According to Kovalenko, the reason for such activity may be related to the worsening situation of the Russian army at the front. After all, Ukraine's defense forces continue to maintain the initiative in several directions. They are striking at the logistics of the Russian occupiers, including in the south, and are gradually making it more difficult to supply Russian troops. At the same time, attacks on targets deep within Russian territory are continuing. Chemical industry enterprises, oil infrastructure, and air defense systems are coming under attack. According to the experts' assessment, vulnerabilities are being detected even in the Moscow area. Kovalenko also emphasizes that Russian army losses remain so high that without a new partial mobilization, Moscow cannot expect any significant changes in the situation. However, even mobilization, according to Kovalenko, can only temporarily prolong the war without addressing the key problems of the Russian army.
Russia is now trying to force Ukraine into concessions at the negotiating table through terror, but this is naive. It will not happen, although Putin apparently believes it will. Russia must immediately stop the war, and only then will it be able to avoid the consequences that Putin has not yet told the Russian people about.
Analyst and Ukrainian serviceman Kirilo Sazonov notes Moscow's attempt to intimidate everyone with new strikes on Kyiv, primarily foreign diplomats, failed.
He grandly aimed to conquer the entire universe and threatened to use the Death Star. But he ended up just being incredibly rude to an old lady on the tram. That was the reaction, because Russia's threats are no longer really taken seriously anymore. It's considered good form not to take them seriously, but to just brush them off. High-ranking official representatives publicly treated these threats with an obvious sense of disdain. You could even say they demonstratively showed their complete disregard and total lack of respect for Russia's threats.
Earlier, the EU ambassador to Kyiv, Katarina Maternova, stated that Western diplomats would not leave Kyiv despite threats from the Russian Federation about new strikes on the city.
Friends, this was the Pritzel Project. My name is Vladimir Timoshenko. We will see each other soon. Take care, lightly armed forces of Ukraine. Bye.